My explanation is that there is no authentic 1960s point of view in any of the elite universities, okay? but rather the most liberated minds of my generation of the 1960s did not go on to graduate school. I witnessed this with my own eyes. I saw genuine Marxists, okay, at my college, which was the State University of New York at Binghamton, upstate New York, Harper College, which had a huge cohort of very radical downstate New York Jews, okay, who, in fact, the Harper used to be called Berkeley East. So I saw genuine, passionate Marxists with my own eyes. They were not word choppers. They were not snide postmodernists. Okay? They were in-your-face aggressive. They used the language of the people. They had a populist energy. Okay? They dressed working class. They were non-materialistic. Okay? These are people who lived by their own convictions. They were against the graduate schools. When I went on to graduate school and it became known that I was going to go to Yale, I was confronted by a leader of the radicals on campus in broad daylight in front of everyone, who denounced me for, he said, grad school is not where it's happening. You don't do that. If you have to go to graduate school, you should go to Buffalo. Now, I had applied to SUNY Buffalo because the great leftist critic Leslie Fiedler was there, who had a huge impact on me. He created identity politics, but without its present distortions. Right? And Norman Holland, the psychoanalytic critic, was there. I would have been very happy to have gone on to Buffalo, but I needed the library at Yale, so I continued on to Yale. There were no radicals in the graduate schools, right? From 1968 to 72 when I was there. There were only one radical, Todd Gitlin, okay, went on to have a career success. Okay? The actual radicals of the 1960s, okay, either went off, dropped out of college and went off to create communes, right? Or they were taking acid and destroyed their brains. Now, I have also written about that. The destruction of the minds, okay, of the most talented members of my generation through LSD. It was going on all around me. Right? So what's happened is the actual legacy of the 60s got truncated. The idea that these post-structuralists and postmodernists are heirs of the 1960s revolution is an absolute crock. Okay? What they represent, as Foucault shows, Foucault said, okay, that the biggest influence on his thinking, okay, was Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, okay, which was a post-World War II play written in Paris that was about the disillusionment and nihilism experienced after Hitler went through, occupied France, right, and all of Europe was in ruins. It had nothing to do, what's in Waiting for Godot has nothing to do with the authentic legacy of the 1960s, which was about genuine multiculturalism, a movement toward India, toward Hinduism, a transformation of consciousness through psychedelics, which I did not take, but which I identify with totally through the music, etc. Right? It was a turn toward the body. It was a turn toward sensory experience, okay, not this word chopping thing and this like cynical removal from actual experience. Right? That French import, okay, came in, okay, to the graduate schools. It did not affect any genuine 1960s person. The real 1960s revolution was about Jung. It was about a way of seeing the cosmos in mythological terms. Right? And the Jungian contribution went on into the New Age movement of the 1970s, aside from the universities. Right? So who took over the universities were these careerists. Okay? I saw them with my own eyes. I saw what happened. I was at Yale when Derrida was being shipped over, okay, to address the students, the grad students, and the faculty. And I said to a fellow student after hearing one of these guys speak, it wasn't Derrida, it was another one of the theorists. I said, they are like high priests murmuring to each other. Right? This was an elitist form from the start. Okay? It was not progressive, it was not revolutionary, it was reactionary. It was a desperate attempt to hold on to what had happened before the 1960s sensory revolution. So this postmodernist thing, okay, this trashing, okay, of the text, this encouragement, okay, of a superior and destructive attitude toward the work of art. We're going through through it, okay, primly with red pen in hand, finding all the evidence of sexism, check, racism, check, homophobia, check. That is not the empathic, emotional, okay, sensory-based, okay, revolution of the 1960s. Right? I am sick and tired of these people claiming any kind of mantle from the 1960s. They're frauds. These people are, what happened in the 1970s was a collapse of the job market in academia. Okay? All of a sudden, the jobs were scarce. And this thing was there, the new and improved and shiny thing, okay, to be a theorist. Okay? People seized on it. Okay? It was institutionalized. Right? And it's an enormous betrayal of the 1960s. These professors, okay, who allege that art is nothing, okay, but an ideological movement by one elite, okay, against against another group, right? These people are Philistines. Okay, they're Philistines. They're middlebrow, hopelessly middlebrow. Okay, they have no sense of beauty. They have no sense of the aesthetic. Now, Marxism does indeed assert this. Okay, Marxism tries to reconfigure the universe in terms of materialism. It sees it does not recognize any kind of spiritual dimension. Now, I'm an atheist, but I see the great world religions as enormous works of art, okay, as the best way to understand the universe and man's place in it. I find them enormously moving. They're like enormous poems. Right? What I have called for, the true revolution, okay, would have been, okay, to make the core curriculum of world education, the world, okay, the great religions of the world. I feel that is the only way to achieve understanding, and it's also a way to present the aesthetic. Okay, because I feel that the real 60s vision was about exaltation, elevation, cosmic consciousness. Okay, right? All of these things, okay, were rejected, okay, by these midgets, okay, intellectual midgets who seized on to Lacan, Derrida, and Foucault. Right? My career has been in the art schools. So my entire career, beginning at Bennington College. Right? So I represent a challenge to this from the perspective of art. Right? It is absolute nonsense, okay, as post-structuralism maintains, that reality is mediated by language, by words, everything that we can know, including gender. It's absolutely madness, because I'm teaching students whose majors are ceramics, okay, or dance, okay, who are jazz musicians, who understand reality in terms of the body, sensory activation. Okay? So what happened was something was going on in the art world as well. I identify with Andy Warhol and pop art. Okay, that was what was going on during my years in college. Everything about Andy Warhol was like, wow. Admiration, wow. What happened immediately after that in the arts, 1970s, okay, was this collapse into a snide sort of postmodernism also. This happened in the art world, right? And it was an utter misunderstanding, okay, of culture, it seems to me, by that movement in the art world. That is, oppositional art, in my view, is dead, okay? It's been, and what postmodernism is a pathetic attempt to continue the old heroism of the avant-garde. The avant-garde was genuinely heroic from the early 19th century, okay, where we're talking about, where the Courbet, the realists, we're talking about Monet and the Impressionists, people who genuinely suffered for their radical ideas, their innovations, and so on, right? Going right down to Picasso and down to Jackson Pollock, who truly suffered, okay, for his art. It was only after his death, okay, that suddenly the market was created for abstract art. Pop art killed the avant-garde. The idea that the avant-garde continues is an absolute delusion of the contemporary art world, okay, which feels that it must attack, challenge, okay, the simplistic beliefs of the hoi polloi. Okay, it's somehow the art. Okay, from the moment, okay, Andy Warhol went through and embraced the popular media, instead of having the opposition to it, the serious artists had had. Okay, that was the end of oppositional art. Okay, so we have been going on now for 50 years. The postmodernism in academia is hand in hand with the stupidity and infantilism that masquerades as important art at galleries everywhere. This incredible, it's mechanism of contemporary art, pushing things that are so hopelessly derivative, and with this idea that once again that the art art world somehow has a superior view of reality. The authentic leftism is populist, okay? It is based in working class style, working class language, working class direct emotion, an openness and brusqueness of speech, okay? Not this fancy contorted jargon of the pseudo-leftists of academe, who are frauds. These people who managed to rise to the top at Berkeley, at Harvard, at Princeton, okay? The idea that these people are radical, they are career people, they're corporate types, okay, who succeeded in, and they love the institutional context. They know how to manipulate the bureaucracy, which has totally invaded and usurped, okay, the academe everywhere, okay? These people are company players. They could have done well in any field, okay? They love to sit in endless committees. They love bureaucratic regulation and so on. There's not one leftist, okay, in American academe raised his or her voice against the obscene growth of tuition costs, which have bankrupted a whole generation of young people. Not one voice, okay, to challenge that invasion by the bureaucrats, okay? Absolute fascist bureaucrats, okay? They're cancerous, okay? There's so many of them. The faculty have completely lost any power in American academe, okay? It's a scandal what has happened, okay? And they deserve the present servitude that they're in right now, okay? Because they never protested. Okay? Yes. My first job at Bennington College, 1976, I was there, when there was an uprising by the faculty against encroachment by the Board of Trustees and the president, okay? And it was a huge thing. It was reported on the New York Times and so on, and we pushed that president out, okay? And there's not been a single uprising of that kind against encroachment by the trustees and by the administrations in all these decades, okay? Passive slaves, they deserve their slavery. And a total abandonment of any kind of education, actually, in history and culture. All right, it's gone along with it. That is the transformation into a cafeteria kind of a menu, okay, where you can pick this course or that course or this course without any kind of guidance from the university about a central core curriculum that teaches you history and chronology and introduces you to the basics, right? Because our professors are such prima donnas, they can only teach in their little areas. So we have this total fragmentation, okay? The great art history survey courses are being abandoned steadily. Okay? Why? Because graduate students are not trained to see the great narratives, because we are taught now that narratives are false. Well, I can only speak about literary professors, really, and they seem to me, almost universally in the U.S., to be very naive. They seem to know nothing about actual history, political science, or economics. So it is simply an attitude. They have an attitude. Marxism becomes simply a badge by which they telegraph their solidarity with a working class that they have nothing to do with. Right? I mean,
and generally nothing but contempt.
Yes, and the thing is that the campus leftists are almost notorious, okay, for their rather snobbish treatment of staff. I mean, they don't have any rapport with the actual working class members of the of the infrastructure, the janitors, and and even the secretaries. There's a kind of high and mighty aristocracy. These are people who have wandered into the English department, right, and were products of a time when during the new criticism, okay, when both history and psychology had been excluded. Right? I mean, my ambition, okay, was, I love the new criticism, okay, as a style of textual analysis, right, and the new criticism had multiple interpretations, okay, that were possible, okay, and that were encouraged. In fact, one of the great projects was Maynard Mack's series, 20th Century Views, where you had at least books. I adored them in college. It was about Jane Austen or about Emily Bronte or about Wordsworth, and they were collections of alternate views of the same thing. The idea that there were no alternate views and there was no relativistic, situational kind of an interpretive approach is nonsense. Okay, but the point was we needed to restore history to literary study, okay, and we needed to add psychology to it because there was great animus against Freud. When I arrived in graduate school, in fact, I actually went into the director of graduate studies and protested the way Freud and Freudian were used as negative terms, okay, in a sneering way by the very WASP professors. Right? So we needed to have, and actually it seemed like we were moving there. Okay, in the early 1970s was a great period of psychobiography about political figures. Okay, and so I thought it's happening. And all of a sudden, it all got short-circuited by this arrival, of post-structuralism and postmodernism. in the 1970s, right? So I feel I'm an old historicist, okay, not a new historicist. So I think new historicism is an absolute scam, right? And it's like it's just a way. It's like tweezers. You pick a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. You make a little tiny salad, okay, and somehow this atomized thing, okay, is supposed to mean something. It's all to me very superficial, very cynical, very distant. I am the product, okay, of old historicism, of German philology. At its height, my first choice of a profession when I was a child was Egyptology, archaeology. Everything I ever think about or say is related to an enormous time scheme, okay, from antiquity and indeed from the Stone Age, right? And that is the problem with these people. They're mal-educated. The postmodernists and academic Marxists, okay, are mal-educated, embarrassingly so, okay? They know nothing before the present. Right. Foucault, okay, is absolutely a joke before the Enlightenment, okay? Perhaps he might be useful to people to talk about what happened after neoclassicism, which, by the way, he failed to notice, okay? A lot of what he was talking about, okay, turns out to be simply the hangover of neoclassicism, okay? This is how ignorant that man was. I mean, he was not talented as a researcher. He knew absolutely nothing, okay? He knew nothing about antiquity. How can you make any kind of large structure, large mechanism, to analyze Western culture without knowing about classical antiquity, okay? He did not see anything. This was a person who had no business making large theoretical statements about anything. Well, Foucault's admirers actually think that he began, the entire turn toward a sociological, grounding of modern psychology. The social psychology was well launched in the 1920s, for example. Right. The levels of ignorance of these people who think Foucault is so original have not read Durkheim, they've not read Max Weber, they've not read Irving Goffman. Okay, so in other words, to me, everything in Foucault seemed obvious, okay, because I had read the sources from which he was borrowing without attribution. Mm-hmm. So I mean, again, I know these people. I mean, I've met. In some cases, knew them in graduate school. People who went on to become these admirers of Foucault, Lacan, Derrida, and I know what their training was. Their training was purely within the English department. That's all they ever knew. They never made any research outside of that, right? And so the idea, Foucault is simply a mechanism. It's like a little tiny kit by which they can approach everything in culture, but the contortions of language, the deliberate labyrinthine elitist language, at the same time as pretending to be a leftist, okay, this is one of the biggest frauds ever practiced. But what's absurd about it, absolutely ludicrous, all right, is that these people, these American academics, are imitating the contorted language of French translations from the French, okay? When Lacan is translated into English, right, there's a contortion there, okay? What he was trying to do in French was to break up, okay, the neoclassical formulations that descended from Racine. There was something that was going on. There was a sabotage of the French language going on that was necessary in France, not necessary in English. We have this long tradition of poetry going back to Shakespeare and Chaucer. We have our own language, far more vital than the French.
Oh yeah, the French constrain their language all the time.
Yes, sir.
by bureaucracy.
The absurdity in the amateurism, okay, of American academics, okay, trying to imitate, okay, a translation of Lacan, okay, when Lacan's doing something in France that is absolutely not necessary and indeed wrong to be doing in English. All right? So the utter cynical abandonment, okay, of the great tradition of the English departments. Right? And I felt that the true radicalism was not about adding on other departments. Okay, so we have African American studies and women's studies and so on. The true radicalism would have been to shatter the departmental structure. That's what I wanted. I feel that was the authentic revolutionary 1960s thing to do, right? To blend all the literature studies together, okay? To make easier, to make an interdisciplinary kind of organization, closer to the British model, where a person can pursue related subjects, overlapping subjects. These departmental models, okay, were to me totalitarian to begin with, okay, separating language into fiefdoms, okay? And what this did to create English women's studies department, absolutely out of the air. Just snap your fingers and create women's studies. The English department had taken a century to develop. Okay, it was a huge argument. Okay, within within it, right? And all of a sudden to create, okay, a department with a politicized agenda from the start, okay, by people without any training, whatever, in that field, okay, what should be the parameters of the field? What should be the requirements of that field? How about biology, okay, if you're going to be discussing gender, that should have been a #1 requirement, okay, as part of any women's studies department or program.
Yes.
But no, okay, it was all hands off. It was just the administrators wanted to solve a public relations problem, okay? They had a situation with very few women faculty nationwide at a time when the women's movement had just started up. The spotlight of attention was on them. They needed women faculty fast. They needed the women's subject on the agenda fast, right? So they just like, poof, let there be women's studies, okay? And now we'll just hire some women, usually from English departments, you know, here and there, and we'll just throw them together. You invent it. You say what it is. So that's why women's studies got frozen at a certain point of ideology, okay, of the early 1970s. I was already in revolt from it, okay? I was a precursor in terms of my endorsement of feminism before even now was created, right? But I couldn't even have a conversation with any of these women. They were hysterical about the subject of biology. They knew nothing about hormones, okay? I mean, I probably got in fist fights over this. People were so convinced that biology had nothing whatever to do with gender differences. Well, and there also was the abandonment, okay, of the of the canon. Okay, people asserted that the canon was the product of bias and again of a provincial elitism and so on. But in point of fact, as a student of the history of the arts, okay, I can assure people that the canon, okay, overwhelmingly so, is the result of what artists have determined. Okay, we say a work is important, is canonical, because artists following it, okay, were influenced by it. We have this like beautiful cascading tradition of influence. All right, so it's another part of the Philistinism, okay, of current education, to believe that there are these external reasons, okay, for why a work lasts, why a work written 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago has global relevance.
As if it's some sort of political conspiracy that's
Yes,
based
right.
on power.
Yes,
As if anybody could even manage that, no matter how nefarious they were.
Right. But also, we in the 60s had the idea, okay, that there was a human sensibility, okay, that transcended individual nations and so on, right? And that there was this like rubric for cosmic consciousness, okay, this sense of the universe as a whole, and to see the human being in relationship to great eternal principles of life and death, mortality, and so on. Whereas Marxism is blind. Marxism is very narrow. All it sees is society, okay? It sees nothing beyond society. It doesn't see nature, okay? I mean, it's absolutely mad, okay? How you can have a system being taught, okay, in universities, right, which thinks that this tiny thing of society, okay, compared to the enormity and beauty of nature, okay, it should take all of our, absorb all of our energy and attention. So, I mean, I just think that there's like a parochialism, a provincialism, now a kind of systematized elitism in our current education has got to be rooted out. And I want to return to basics, great simplicities. All these faculty members teaching their little tiny courses that has to do with their own specialty. That's got to stop. Okay, people can pursue whatever they want in their private research as scholars. Okay, certainly that's necessary, but they must teach in the core curriculum. And people must decide what is crucial for an educated person to know. I do want a multicultural. I do want a global curriculum. Okay, I want all the cultures taught. Okay, right? This is not the answer. Marxism, this neo-Marxism in the universities, okay, is simply it's lazy. It's a lazy way to assert multiculturalism without actually doing the research and the study of other cultures. Okay.